When all is said and done, I think the simple yet profound message of this episode is it's valid and normal to indulge in fantasy on occasion, as long as you don't allow it to take over your life, as long as you're not hurting anyone, and most importantly, as long as you don't let anyone find out about the really, really sick shit. This is a review of the Star Trek The Next Generation episode Hollow Pursuits. If you have not seen this episode and you don't want to know why everybody hates Barkley, be warned. Spoilers beyond this point. The time has come to examine the dark side of the holodeck. Other than the fact that it can become an inescapable box of murder at literally any time. The dark side, emotionally speaking. We open in 10 forward, or do we? And meet Lieutenant Barkley, who is receiving a warning from Guinan. I don't want any trouble, Barkley, she says. And Barkley's like, trouble? Why would there be trouble? Then Geordi walks in and goes up to Barkley and says, you're on duty. Lay off the boozing and get back to your station. Barkley turns to him and says, you know what? I don't care for you on a personal level, and gives Geordi a slight shove that sends him flying across the room and into the wall. This Barkley guy doesn't take shit, does he? Wow, he's pretty awesome. Uh-oh, he's gotten Riker's attention now. Time to learn a painful yet valuable lesson, Mr. Barkley, about why you don't mess with number one. Riker steps to Barkley and says, this is insubordination. And Barkley says, well then, here's to insubordination, and takes a drink. And then whoa, hang on, wait, hey, you don't touch Riker, you let him go! Barkley talks some smack to Riker, throws him aside, crosses over to Counselor Troi, who has been sitting at a table watching this all unfold like, holy shit, I hope these chairs are waterproof. Barkley and Troi are about to get up close and personal, but then Barkley is paged to the cargo bay. Barkley stands back and says, computer save program, and ha! It was all a holodeck program this whole time. I knew it all along. As if Barkley could manhandle Riker like that. As if anybody could manhandle Riker like that if he didn't want them to. We cut to the cargo bay where Riker and Geordi are standing around talking about Barkley, who is a recent addition to the Enterprise crew and who doesn't seem to be working out so far. Always late, does just enough to get by, and the other day I overheard him talking politics with the security chief from Babylon 5. He's a nut! Riker says, I think it's time we spoke to Captain Picard about Lieutenant Barkley. That's Wesley's nickname for him. Keep it to yourself. Even though I just told it to you. Barkley shows up, tries to hide, gets called out by Geordi, who puts him to work checking out a malfunctioning anti-gravity unit, and gets a stern talking to from Riker, who tells him, hey, I don't know how things were on your last ship, but this is the Enterprise, the only ship that actually matters. All other ships are meaningless. All other places in the universe are meaningless. Your life, up until the moment you stepped aboard this ship, was meaningless. And if you want to stay here and have a chance to mean something, you'd better get your shit together, and I'm talking fast. Savvy? I understand, sir. No, say savvy. I want you to respond in my macho vernacular. Savvy, sir. Carry on. While Barkley tries to figure out what's wrong with the anti-grav unit, which has failed while carrying some canisters containing tissue samples the Enterprise is transporting to a planet currently experiencing a disease outbreak, Geordi and Riker meet with Picard about Barkley. Geordi has requested that Barkley be transferred off the Enterprise, but Picard's like, if he sucks that much, how'd he get here in the first place? I think instead of sending him away and making him someone else's problem, we, and by we I mean you, Geordi, should get to know him. Find out what he's good at and give him a chance to contribute in a positive way. Geordi, I want you to make him your best friend. But I already have a best friend, the robot who asks nothing of me and always does what I tell him. Well, now you have a new best friend. And stop calling him Barkley. Only an uncouth ruffian unfit to wear a Starfleet uniform would talk about one of their comrades in such a belittling way. If I hear anyone calling him that ever again, it's straight out the airlock with them. Geordi tries to do what Picard asks of him. He invites Barkley to attend the morning staff meeting in engineering, but when Barkley tries to share his progress on tracking down the problem with the anti-grav unit, Wesley just talks over him. Frustrated, Barkley retreats to the holodeck, where he talks to a recreation of Counselor Troy. Jesus, that Wesley is the worst, isn't he? I should have just told him to shut up. I bet yelling, "Shut up, Wesley," must feel so goddamn good. No wonder the captain did it that one time only. Smug little know-it-all. That kid just makes me howling mad. Holo Troy's like, "Maybe this'll make you feel better," and they kiss. Then Barkley says, "I dig it, but Daddy's in the mood for something strange, but also quaint and chaste." And he changes the program to your standard Sylvan Glade, and Troy now appears dressed in robes, announcing herself as the goddess of empathy. Sure seems to work for Barkley. Meanwhile, Geordi, Wesley, Data, and this other jerk-off from engineering are in 10 forward, and Geordi's telling them all about how the captain has ordered them to be nice to Barkley from now on. The jerk-off takes a drink, but his glass is suddenly leaking. Data takes the glass and examines it. There are finger-shaped dents in the side. Holding it a little tight, were you? In engineering, Data analyzes the glass and finds that its molecular structure has been altered, though he doesn't know how or by what. So Geordi hands the glass to Barkley and says, "Hey, this is your problem now too." Barkley thinks whatever damaged the glass might be related to the anti-gravity device problem, so they meet with Riker and Picard on the bridge and give them an update. Picard says, "Good work, Mr. Broccoli." Barkley leaves, and Picard looks at Riker like, "So, you're the captain now? Because from here, I'm heading straight down to the shuttle bay to fling myself into space, okay?" Geordi is still frustrated with Barkley. He vents to Guinan about how nervous Barkley is all the time. And Guinan says maybe he's nervous around the rest of you because you're all such assholes to him. Geordi decides to talk to Barkley, so he asks the computer where Barkley is, and the computer stooges Barkley out by telling Geordi he's in the holodeck. Geordi goes to the holodeck, walks in on Barkley's Sylvan Glade fantasy, which includes holograms of Dr. Crusher and Wesley dressed as people who were probably guillotined during the French Revolution. A little further on, Geordi finds Barkley fighting a 3-on-1 duel with a trio of musketeers who bear striking resemblances to Geordi, Data, and Picard. Watching Barkley effortlessly dominate the duel, Geordi's like, "What kind of loser plays on easy mode like that? He's not a true gamer." Barkley finally notices Geordi, realizes he's been found out, and a bit later, as they talk in 10 forward, Barkley offers to put in for a transfer. Geordi's like, "Not so fast, man. I'm not going to tell anyone about what I saw on the holodeck, okay? As far as I'm concerned, your fantasies, your weird, sexless Louis XIII-era fantasies, are your own business, but it's clearly affecting your life and your work, so go talk to Counselor Troy about it." The talk with Counselor Troy does not go well. Barkley is very nervous, understandable. After all, this is the real Counselor Troy, the woman Barkley has created entire holodeck programs around just so he could know what it's like to closed-mouth kiss her. For her part, Troy decides to try and make Barkley less nervous by telling him to close his eyes and dimming the lights and sitting down right next to him. He flees the room within seconds. Top-rate work, mind-reading therapist. The problems on the Enterprise continue. O'Brien reports a malfunction in one of the transporter rooms, presumably the one where he spends all day standing motionless behind a control console and all night sleeping on a bare mattress on the floor in the back corner. Riker schedules a meeting to talk about it, but Barkley is late. Riker's like, "I've had it with this dork. Computer, where's Barkley?" And the computer stooges Barkley out again, and Riker, Troy, and Geordi all go to the holodeck to get him. They run into the three musketeers, who introduce the group to their little buddy, a short, squeaky fellow who looks just like Riker. Not finding this nearly as funny as Troy and Geordi do, Riker tries to erase the holograms, but Troy steps in like, "Hey, come on, these characters are products of Barkley's imagination. This place is his refuge. If we just invade it and destroy it, it could really mess him up. Chill out. Be a little more sensitive." Then Troy sees the goddess of empathy, and she's like, "Oh, fuck this shit right here." While Riker, Geordi, and Troy are looking for Barkley, there's another malfunction that causes the Enterprise to suddenly accelerate. Picard calls Geordi like, "Hey, what just happened?" And Geordi says, "I don't know, sir. I'm in the holodeck." And Picard says, "Well, get back to engineering, Geordi. It's an emergency. Getting a blowjob from the woman who designed the Enterprise's engine can wait." I don't know what he's talking about. He's such a jokester. They find Barkley napping in Dr. Crusher's lap in the least erotic version of that scenario possible. Barkley is humiliated to be exposed like this, but there's no time to dwell on that. To engineering. Geordi and Barkley try to figure out why the ship accelerated like that, but they can't get the diagnostic tools to work. Barkley recommends dropping out of warp while they figure it out, but when Data tries to do that, the controls don't respond. Apparently, the matter-antimatter injectors are jammed, which sounds like a problem. The ship can't stop or even slow down. Speed begins increasing again, and if they can't unjam the injectors in the next 15 minutes, the ship will fly itself apart. Geordi calls an emergency brainstorm session. It's him, Barkley, Wesley, Jerkoff number 1, Jerkoff number 2. All the Jerkoffs are here too. No one can find the connection between all these recent seemingly random malfunctions until Barkley suggests that maybe it's one of them. Maybe somehow a member of the crew has been unwittingly spreading some contaminant that is making the ship go haywire. It makes sense. Jerkoff number 1's glass got mangled. Chief O'Brien's transporter malfunctioned. They were both in the cargo bay when the anti-grav unit failed, and one of those tissue sample canisters broke. They used the computer to come up with a list of substances that could have caused all these problems and narrow it down to something called Invidium, which just sounds like something you shouldn't have around, doesn't it? Geordi and Barkley do a test to confirm that Invidium is present in the medical canisters, and then they flood the injectors with supercooled gas to render the Invidium inert, and that allows Data to regain control and shut down the engines, saving the day with seconds to spare. Thanks, Barkley! Later, Barkley walks onto the bridge and says goodbye to the crew. It was difficult deciding to leave you like this, but I have discussed it with Counselor Troy, and we agree it's for the best that I limit myself to two-dimensional porn from now on. And he says, computer end program, because he's on the holodeck, and he's saying goodbye to his fantasy versions of the crew, not the real ones. Gotcha! Probably not. As he exits, he says, computer erase all holodeck programs created by Reginald Barkley. Except number 9. Ooh, that must be the really sick one we didn't get to see. The end. I suspect it will be neither surprising nor controversial when I tell you that I think Hollow Pursuits is the best holodeck episode Star Trek The Next Generation ever made. That's not a universally shared opinion, but it's a pretty common one. It's not just a good holodeck episode, it's a good episode, period. And the biggest reason for that is its central character, Lieutenant Barkley. I did an entire video about Barkley a few years ago, so if you want to hear my thoughts on him at length, I'd recommend looking that one up. The short version of why Barkley is such a compelling character is this. He's relatable in a way most other Star Trek characters aren't. It's not that I don't feel like I can relate to Captain Picard or Data or the others. I can and do relate to them, but in a more metaphorical sense. There are also things about them that I can't relate to, at least not directly. I've never been as eloquent as Picard or as confident and commanding as Riker. I don't know what that feels like. But when Barkley tells Geordi that he doesn't know what to do with his hands, or how he feels during a party, shit, I know exactly what that feels like. Barkley doesn't have the impossible self-assurance of his crewmates. Barkley doesn't know what the right thing to say is in any given situation. Barkley experiences anxiety, and not just anxiety over Star Trek stuff like, is the ship going to blow up? Social anxiety, anxiety that doesn't seem like that big of a deal when you describe it to someone else, but which can still have a significant effect on your everyday life. Personally, I haven't had to deal with the level of social anxiety that Barkley exhibits on a regular basis, but I have had to deal with it now and then. I know what it feels like, and it sucks. I know what it feels like to not belong, or to be thrown into a new group where you don't know anyone. That anxiety that comes with having to make friends, wondering if you'll be able to, worrying that you won't. I've never been to space, but I've been where Barkley is. Fortunately for me, I didn't have to put down roots there like Barkley did, but I still feel like I know something about how he feels nonetheless. Thanks to some smart, sensitive writing by Sally Caves and the performance of Dwight Schultz, Barkley himself is compelling, funny, sad, sympathetic, and so is the way the episode uses him to deliver a message about tolerance and compassion. Though it becomes fairly standard practice on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, TNG doesn't typically aim its social criticisms at its own main characters. But this time it's pretty clear that we're meant to be on Team Barkley here. Mostly, anyway. Geordi's concerns about Barkley's impact on the rest of his team are valid, and it's understandable why he and Riker and others feel the way they do about Barkley, but just because a feeling is understandable, that doesn't make it acceptable. As is often the case, Guinan serves as the primary voice of tolerance, suggesting to Geordi that maybe Barkley would be less nervous to be around people if he felt like people actually wanted him around. Though Guinan's not the only one, Captain Picard also points out that Barkley, despite whatever personal issues he may be dealing with, is a Starfleet officer who has chosen the same way of life as the rest of them and is deserving of the same respect. Then, after giving that speech, Picard himself slips up and calls Barkley broccoli. It's a rare but welcome example of introspective writing on TNG, of showing us that these people aren't perfect, that as admirable and heroic as they are, they can be selfish, short-sighted jerks too, every once in a while. What's important is that they're able to acknowledge that and do better. In playing Barkley, Schultz gets to show off his range by letting us see both the private side of the character and the side he shows to others. Alone in the holodeck, immersed in the fantasies he creates and commands, Barkley is a parody of the bold, resolute protagonists we're used to on shows like this. He's a man of action, a man who takes what he wants, a man who strides toward his chosen destination with chest out and shoulders back. During his swordplay with the Three Musketeers, he even employs the transatlantic accent favored by many a legendary actor upon the stage. Outside the holodeck, the bravado is gone. He rounds his shoulders, he talks into his chest, he stammers, not a trace of big dick energy to be seen. All of that is very well performed, but it's kind of elementary. What really impressed me about Schultz's performance when I watched it this time was how he's able to find a third gear for when Barkley is himself outside the holodeck, but pushing past his anxiety to focus on the problem. There's some of that in the climactic staff meeting. Fucking TNG. What other sci-fi adventure show had climactic staff meetings? When Barkley finds his voice and proposes what ultimately turns out to be the correct solution. But we also catch Barkley in that mode a bit earlier, when he and Geordi are at the computer console trying to get those injectors to work. The dialogue is nothing but technobabble, but Schultz delivers it with a commitment and a seriousness that puts across the urgency of the situation and makes it sound like he's actually saying something and meaning it. The script, written by Sally Caves, by the way, this is one of only 2 writing credits to her name. The other is a story by credit for Babel, a first season episode of Deep Space Nine, which she shares with Ira Steven Behr. Amazing. Anyway, the script subverts expectations in a couple of clever ways. The story is structured in a standard way with an A plot and a B plot, but there are no aliens, there's no visit to an unknown planet, there's no external threat or mystery at all. The A plot is get a load of this guy, and the B plot is our ship don't work no more. The 2 plots intertwine in a way that feels natural. We're allowed to spend time with Barkley and get to know him while also being drawn into this mystery of the apparently random malfunctions throughout the ship that gradually builds until hitting a crisis point when the ship accelerates and can't slow down. And not only does the plot development feel organic, so does the role of the holodeck in the story. That's another subverted expectation. It's a holodeck episode that's not actually about the holodeck. There's no holodeck malfunction. In fact, while other systems on the ship are behaving in inexplicable and unpredictable ways, the holodeck works fine for the entire episode. No one gets trapped inside. No one observes with alarm that, oh my God, the safety protocols must be offline. No one finds the answer to the problem thanks to the holodeck. The holodeck doesn't figure into the plot at all, but it figures into the story. A story that uses the holodeck in a way that is simultaneously inventive and obvious. It avoids all the established tropes of holodeck episodes and focuses instead on how having the holodeck available affects these people's lives and forces them to confront questions that they would have to confront. What happens when the imaginary world you can create in the holodeck becomes more important to you than the real world? What happens when someone uses the holodeck to create holograms of real people without their knowledge or consent? Why aren't there locks on these goddamn doors? These are all reasonable things to ask. And Barkley's holodeck programs are fun. Picard, Data, and Geordi as the Three Musketeers, Minnie Riker, Wesley as the spoiled pie-eating brat. What's not to like? Because this is a show produced for broadcast television, not a gritty premium cable or streaming series, Barkley's fantasies are almost pathologically innocent and inoffensive, except, understandably, to people like Troy or Riker who are featured in them in uncomfortable or unflattering ways. But on an emotional level, they're understandable. Barkley doesn't get along with his bosses, so he creates a version of the world on the holodeck where he gets to push them around instead. Barkley is intimidated by Riker's height, so he makes a more diminutive version. Barkley feels unappreciated for his knowledge and skills, so he creates a program where he can outfight 3 men who look like his superior officers and have them express amazement at how great he is. Barkley's nervous around women, so he creates women who will never reject him. It's not healthy, but it's understandable. That's actually not a bad description of Barkley himself, is it? Not healthy, but understandable. Geordi gets it, eventually anyway. He starts off the episode just wanting to send Barkley away, but by the end he's not only come to appreciate what Barkley brings to the table as an engineer, he's also probably just grateful that now there's someone on the ship who has an even more embarrassing attachment to the holodeck than him. Woo! Thank God I'm no longer the weird one in this specific context. Hollow Pursuits introduces us to a compelling new character who will become a fan favorite and one of TNG's best recurring cast members. It presents an atypical problem which the crew has to work together to solve. It lets us see some of our heroes treating a misfit the wrong way so that hopefully we can be reminded to treat people the right way in our own lives. And it uses the holodeck in a creative, entertaining, and unexpected way. It's funny, it's smart, it's insightful, it calls us to empathy, understanding, and kindness, and it shows us that your true friends are the ones who will still talk to you even after they find the slash fic you wrote about them. Star Trek at its finest. Those are my thoughts on Hollow Pursuits. What do you think of this episode? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments. If you'd like to support this channel, and I sure wish you would, if you can afford it, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or by making a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links are in the description. Please join me next time for a review of another holodeck episode. There are still quite a few TNG holodeck shows I haven't gotten to, but they will have to wait for a future batch. For now, we're jumping over to another series, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and an episode from that show's 4th season titled Our Man Bashir. See you then. Thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.